let's talk about some real quick principles. And this is important too, especially now with our Gen X, with our millennials again. In communicating your message about damages or anything else, your verbal communication is only 8% of the delivery of your message. I'm not saying words are not important, they're extremely important, but they're only 8% of the delivery of your message. The vocal communication is 37% of the delivery of your message. And nonverbal communication is 55% of the delivery of your message. So it's very, very important. The vocal, the reason it's so important is because that's where they're reading your sincerity. If you are just standing up there going through the motions and you don't believe in your case, it's what Jerry was talking about this morning with the poor defense counsel who have to come in there and meet they come in and meet their client for 30 minutes before they have to go out and try to keep them out of jail. Well, they're going through the motions. It's unfortunate, but they are. So if you don't believe in your case, then get the hell out of the way and let somebody try your case that does believe in it, because there's where they'll nail you. They'll nail you on the vocal because that's what carries your voice, and your eye contact is what carries sincerity. That's your belief in the case. And if you don't believe in it, why should they? So those are important. But what's equally important is what Milton Erickson taught us, the importance of the synthesis between verbal, nonverbal, and vocal communication. If you are saying one thing and your nonverbal communication with your client and with them about your client is saying something else, then the nonverbal will prevail every single time. Every single time. It's 7 times as important in delivery of the message. And what happens if you're given a verbal message and a different nonverbal message, then they realize that your verbal message was what? It's a lie. So if your verbal message is a lie, your trustworthiness just went down the tube. You lose your trustworthiness. You've lost your case unless the defense lawyer is even more untrustworthy than you are, which he always is, but they may not recognize it. Let me tell you very quickly about the unconscious mind appeal and the conscious mind appeal. I've been talking about this, as Eric said, I've been talking about this for 30, 35 years. Daniel Kahneman just wrote this incredible, incredible book, which is all about what he calls System 1 and System 2. He calls it fast thinking. This is thinking fast and slow. The man got the Nobel Prize in economics for the work that's manifest in this book. He knows a little something about communication. We take it and apply it to trials. What he calls slow thinking is the conscious mind appeal. What he calls fast thinking, fast thinking just means you get it right away. You don't process it through your conscious mind. So he has brilliant data in there. The conscious mind appeal, and this is how you reach people through the conscious mind, is the hard evidence, the court's charge, your visual evidence, which is both conscious and unconscious, and your supported numbers, and the word is supported. You should have a reason. Come up with one, whatever it takes. Think about it in advance. Have a reason for your number. Nothing falls flatter than, well, with respect to physical pain and mental anguish, I think that should be $500,000. Why not $500 million? Have a reason. Have a reason for any, just like I think in the McDonald's case, the damages were based on 1 day of coffee sales by McDonald's in all their places around the world. But have a reason for your numbers. The unconscious mind is direct communication with the portion of the brain where fast decisions are made. This is the absolute definition of your millennials. They don't think, they work so fast, if you don't get their attention and hold it immediately, if you put up enough quantum of evidence, and this is what I'm talking about availability, the difference between 16 and 32. You put enough evidence in, not repetition. Kahneman acknowledges, and we've heard juries say it over and over and over, that they hate repetition because it bores them. They say things like, well, obviously that lawyer thinks I'm stupid because they think I didn't get it the first 8 times they said it. So they had to say it a 9th time. There's a big difference between repetition and redundancy. Redundancy is what we should do. Redundancy is where you come at the same theme from every different direction. You come at it from the documentary evidence, the demonstrative evidence, lay testimony, and expert testimony. It's all accumulative evidence on the same theme, but just not repetition of the same words, like Fox News, the echo chamber. That's what they're all about. Okay, so the other thing about the unconscious mind is this is the important part of the brain, because this is where processing takes place. I mean, it's where it goes straight through without processing. Is you tell your story in the present tense because the unconscious mind does not process negative. It doesn't process negatives, and it doesn't process things in the future, and it doesn't process things in the past. If you talk about the present, or if it's happening in the present, the unconscious mind will process it. So that's why you tell the story as if you're there, and you do it in terms of, all right, let's come back now with me now as we visit this scene. What we see, and you're tell the whole story in that fashion. You avoid negatives. That's why the unconscious mind does not process negatives. That's why you don't say the doctor failed to do this. You say the doctor chose to do this. It's because of unconscious mind communication. Rhetorical devices. Rhetorical devices, y'all, are extremely important because they communicate directly with the unconscious mind. A metaphor is the power of a metaphor is so hard to overestimate. For this reason, give you an example. The case I told you that I tried in 1971 with the child. This child had digitoxin toxicity, and so which led to heart failure. They had to defibrillate the child 15 times, which means putting the paddles on them and sending an electric shock through the heart until the heart stops beating. Defibrillation. But defibrillation, the word defibrillation fails to, as Aristotle said, execute the required level of emotion. So if you want to know what your metaphors are that will resonate, you do what I did. I had this big discussion with my doctor as we were driving over to Beaumont, actually, for him to testify. I said, okay, we got to think about this. Defibrillation doesn't get there. This was back before we started using focus groups to figure all this out. I said, but describe for me exactly what's happening. He said, well, you put the heart is fibrillating, which just means squirming like a can of worms, and then you put an electric shock through the heart with sufficient force to stop the heart from beating completely. And then the next signal from the brain comes and it starts the heart back to a normal. It's rebooting the heart, basically. And I said, okay, answer this question for me. Defibrillation is just like, and he thought about it for a moment. He said, well, it's just like electrocution. Same thing we do to people in death row, except we keep the thing going until there's no new signal from the brain. So now, I said, you give that metaphor and give that analogy on the stand when you're asked about it by the defense lawyer. At any opportunity. If he asks you your name, say, well, let me explain to you what defibrillation is. So now we're dealing with 15 electrocutions of a 9-month-old child, and that's what drove the damages up so high that it had to be a remediator. I guarantee you that one thing drove the damages so high it got a remediator. Okay, so you want to find metaphors, analogies. Rule of 3 is a rhetorical device. It's a whole long list of things that we use. Okay, so you want to seek similarities between yourself and the jury. It's just like Lisa talked about Oprah. What are they like? Looking at their intake information, what are they like? They all like Oprah, so you like Oprah too. Seek similarities. All right. Sequencing is extremely important with respect to damages. I personally think that you have to, or at least you should, prove your liability first. And then there's a thing called the Zeigarnik effect. You prove your liability first, and then you have to talk about your damages some, but then you let the jury discover on its own the severity of your damages. I never stood up in front of a jury in my life and said on voir dire examination, ladies and gentlemen, this is a medical malpractice case which has caused this poor plaintiff to have permanent, irreversible brain damage. No. You start out by saying, this is a case involving a severe head injury. And then as you move along through the proof, then it gets a little stronger in the language, but only after the doctor takes the stand and answers the question, doctor, is there anything that can be done to cure this? No. How long do you anticipate that? Well, this is irreversible. This is something this patient will live with for the rest of their life. When the doctor says it's irreversible brain damage, now you can say it. But you don't come in and feed them that because it's hard. It's the expectations are too high because they may get all kind of images in their mind. So start out with lower expectations, and then the Zeigarnik effect is this. It is that jurors, well, we all, not just jurors, but we all cling to tenaciously that which we discover on our own. So what we do is we help the jurors discover on their own how severe this injury is. And then once they discover it on their own, it becomes their discovery. Then the confirmation bias kicks into play, which means that they will then begin seeking evidence that confirms their belief. Once they discover that they believe that this is a severe injury, then they'll start looking for evidence that confirms their own belief. And then it really gets good.